If you never get to hear this, it's because during that period of time, she asked some other people, like, who are these numbnuts? I just did the show.
Welcome to the Two Authors Podcast, an entertaining chat show hosted by best-selling mystery and thriller authors Douglas Pratt and Nicholas Harvey, in lively, humorous and informative conversation with distinguished guests who share their thoughts and experience about forging a successful author career.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Hope everyone's doing great today. How are you, Mr. Nick?
I am top of the freaking world.
Awesome. Hey, we have a fabulous guest today. I'm so excited about this guest. I've been a big fan of hers for as long as I can remember, but it's mystery and fantasy writer Charlaine Harris, and we're going to talk to her very soon, but I have a question for you first.
What do you got?
This question comes from Claire Sargent. What is your favorite celebratory food? So when you're going to celebrate something, what's your favorite celebratory food?
I gotta tell you, when I saw this in our notes thing, I thought it said, "What is your favorite celebrity food?" I'm like, well, it'd take me a little shot, Scarlett Johansson, if that's on the menu.
Okay, well, I suppose.
Celebratory food.
Celebratory. Now my brain is like, whoa, meatloaf would obviously be the one that you choose, right? Possibly with a side of iced tea.
Oh my God. Well, as you know, I am a weirdo and boring when it comes to food. I am not a foodie. I eat about 5 different things, and I'm happy to rotate those 5 forever in a day. Probably sushi.
Sushi's fair. I like sushi a lot. Yeah. I like pie as far as like just celebratory, but one of my favorite things is cobbler, and blackberry cobbler would be right up there at the top. My grandmother used to make we're from the South, so blackberry cobbler was like a staple in my house. In fact, when she died, she had one in her freezer, and we ended up having it for her funeral because she had prepared it ahead of time. Not for her funeral, just because it was coming up on Christmas, so she had prepared extra food for the holidays and had stuck it in the freezer. And so
that would be a full-blown grandma move to actually have a pie in the freezer for her own funeral to make sure everyone eats okay. You know, this episode comes out on Christmas Eve.
Oh, wow. So Merry Christmas, everyone.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas, if that's your thing. All the holiday stuff. I hope you're having a wonderful time. It's been a year, so celebrate with family and enjoy it. Sticky toffee pudding. That sounds good.
Yeah, see? I'll do something new.
All right, let's get on to this guest because she is incredible.
Yeah, this is, if you're not familiar with Charlaine Harris, you would know her from so many of her books because she wrote the Shakespeare series with Lily Barr, the Aurora Tea Garden mysteries, the Midnight Texas, and probably most famously is the Sookie Stackhouse books, which were turned into True Blood on HBO. Fabulous show, great books. And I have been reading her, I really don't remember, since I was a teenager and I came across her books. So excited to talk to Charlaine Harris. Welcome to the show, Charlaine. I'm so excited to have you on. I've been such a huge fan of yours for years and years. I think since I was in high school, I was obviously I'm from Memphis and came across your Shakespeare series and set in Arkansas. And I was like, oh, I got to read that. And then next thing you know, I read just about everything and introduced my wife to Sookie Stackhouse. And she is super jealous because she's out of town right now and has missed meeting you at BoucherCon and here. So,
oh, that's too bad. Maybe I'll meet her at the next BoucherCon.
Maybe. Yeah, I'm going to bring her along next year too. So, but yeah, absolutely. So I'm so excited to have you here. So tell us a little bit like how you got started into writing though. Like, how long have you been writing?
Oh, since I could hold a pencil. I did it my entire childhood. I wrote all these, of course I was a weird kid.
Aren't we? All of us writers are weird kids.
Yes, weird kid that really stood out and nobody understood. But, and now I found my tribe. So I feel pretty good about that. I started writing when I could write. I wrote little stories about dinosaurs and I wrote about ghosts. And, the thing was my teachers didn't tell me I couldn't be a writer.
That's
there's
good.
There's a lot to that. And my parents didn't say, oh, you can't do that. That's crazy. They said, well, you better train to do something else because it might not work out or whatever. And they were absolutely right, because for the first few years, I made very, very little. When I married my second husband, Hal, we've been married now for 46 years.
Congratulations.
So, I think this one's the keeper.
Yes.
Might as well by now.
Yeah, I don't want to trade.
You'd have to retrain another one altogether, and
I couldn't do it. I don't have the patience I used to have when I was younger. Anyway, he gave me an electric typewriter for a wedding present and suggested that I did not have to go back to work if I wanted to write. So I stayed home and I wrote a book on that electric typewriter. And by great good fortune, I was in a creative writing class at University of Missouri that one year, because that was the one year we lived in St. Louis. And the teacher of it was Shannon Ravenel Purvis, who used to be the editor for Great American Short Stories. And she really liked what I wrote in the class. And she recommended me to her former publisher, where she used to work, Houghton Mifflin. And Houghton Mifflin took the book. So
that awesome. Was it.
Yep, that was the start. I mean, I'm not saying they weren't like a million ups and downs. There were.
What was the first book anyway?
It was a mystery, very thin mystery, because I don't know how to write long, apparently. And it was called Sweet and Deadly. And it sold maybe 10 copies. But anyway, they took the book after that, it's kind of a cult book now called The Secret Rage. And every night I get people in my signing line. Almost every time I have a big signing, they say, I read your book, and it meant a lot to me. And I'm going, thank you, sister. Then I took a hiatus for about 5 years while I was having babies. And then found out I was pregnant for the third time when I just started writing again. But I said, okay, baby, you're just going to have to go with this, because this is what I have to do. It was really hard to get back into it publisher-wise. Houghton Mifflin wasn't publishing mysteries anymore. I didn't know publishers could just stop doing stuff. But anyway, I did finally find a publisher for the book, and I got an agent, and he's been my agent ever since. So many, many years we've been together.
So you write across so many genres, obviously starting with mystery, and that's where I kind of found you early on, and you do urban fantasy. And do you have a favorite of what you write of all those, or are you just happy to juggle them around?
Well, it's a little more fun to write books that have supernatural elements, but I can write a straight mystery, and I have done. And I enjoyed that too, because that is, there's a lot of tactics to writing a mystery.
So, Charlaine, who were the big influences when you started out? And that has to have evolved and shifted over the duration that you've been involved in this, obviously.
Many, many times, yeah, because some of the people that are big influences on me now, I'm not going to say they weren't born when I started writing, but they certainly hadn't gotten published when I started writing. I've got to say E.X. Ferrers, Ruth Rendell, Agatha Christie, Marjorie Allingham, all those great, wonderful writers. And I still go back and reread those books sometimes just to get regrounded.
Are you a prolific reader?
God, yes. So many. I mean, I published a list on my website of what I've read that I liked. I'm not going to be negative on anybody. This business is tough enough. But the books I read that I like, I always recommend them on there. So people who maybe haven't heard of those writers will go and buy the book and try it. There's so much out there to read.
I see her bookshelf right behind her. She's loaded with books right there. So.
Oh, heck. Well, those are just mine.
Oh, those are just yours. Wow. Okay, so the listener can't see this because we're not video, but it is just a bookshelf full of books. And I was like, oh, she's got lots of books. And they're all.
There's a lot of books there.
That's a lot of books. Wow.
Well, I have multiple copies. I mean, I've got the paperback and I've got the hardback. And
do you have to go back and refer like to things that you've done in other books?
I do. Yeah, I do. Especially with the Sookie books, because that went 13 books, and I've never before or since written anything that long. So I had this wonderful, wonderful reader, Victoria Koski, and she was nice enough and anal enough to do a Bible for me. Everything in it, everything. And honestly, that was just invaluable. Patience is not my strong suit. So it was just wonderful to have someone do that for me. It just saved my butt a lot of times.
Yeah, we've talked about it quite often on the show, Bible. And, if you don't start those right away, if you don't keep notes on everything, it gets out of hand in a big old hurry.
Oh, it does. And readers notice. I mean, I'm not that picky about details when I'm reading, but people really, really are. And I had to realize that and to take that into account, because they say, oh no, his truck was blue in the last book. And I'm going, is this really important? But to them it is.
It's amazing some of the details people pick up. Yeah, I left a dog out of a few books. I forgot they had a dog.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh no!
So then I had to come up with the poor dog died. So we got a puppy when introduced. I just started over again, rather.
Oh yeah, rather than resurrect the dog.
Yeah, rather than trying to resurrect the old dog. So now you're a pantser, right? I love to ask this question because I'm halfway in between. I'm a hybrid, right? I'm kind of mixed. I have to have certain elements. And some people literally, it always amazes me. Some people sit down with just a blank page and go, okay, I'm going to start writing a story. And then other people, when they say they pants, they have an idea in their head already. They've got bits and pieces. Where do you fall on that? How do you start a novel?
Sometimes one, sometimes the other. Sometimes I would just go page 1, chapter 1. What's going to happen? That's pretty scary and exciting and motivating.
Yeah, I see both of those
well,
things.
now I have to fill up 300 pages. And that's both exciting and terrifying.
Do you find that there's a rhythm in your writing where you start, you get excited, you go, and then you're like, okay, now I've got to figure out, are there waves to it that are consistent, or is it different every time?
I think instinctively, after you've read like 7,000 books
Yeah.
and written 40 of your own, I think you get a sense for the rhythm of the book. And I think you understand where the rise and fall has to be and where something extremely awful needs to happen. I usually kill someone when that comes up because that's a good motivator. And plus it cuts down on the characters. You just get it. And then there needs to be a tender moment. Then there needs to be a revelation. You just get a feeling for it if you've written long enough.
Do you have a favorite character that you have killed off, though?
I killed someone in the Sookie series, and it was the best scene. I thought it was a great scene. And my editor said, oh, Charlaine, you can't kill him.
You can't do that.
But, she was the editor, and she almost never told me anything like that. And then I thought, well, it was such a good scene. I was going, oh, this is great. This is great. And then she said, no, you really can't do that. And I thought, but I wrote the scene.
It's so good. Yeah. Oh.
She said the series, the book would have been better with the scene in it, but the series would not have been better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and I had to think long term with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you're thinking about that big arc, that makes a difference. So. Now, dealing with like the Sookie Stackhouse, obviously, and you've done so much with the television and the film industry, but like, what's the biggest lesson you've learned about the film and TV industry as with the stuff that's been adapted that you've had?
Oh, how long do you have?
As long as you want.
Oh, no, don't tell me that. It was both exciting, terrifying, and infuriating. Because Hollywood time is not like our time. If a convention called you and said, we really, really want you to headline, but you have to be here tomorrow, you would go, no can do. I have a life. And you can do that in Hollywood. They just don't believe you.
They don't care. They're like,
they'll get other people to ask you to do it in different ways, thinking, well, if the right person calls her, she'll do it. And I'm just going, man, I am sorry. I cannot do that. They just couldn't believe I wasn't ready to do that.
To drop at the hat.
To drop everything and say, oh, yeah, I'm catching a plane for LA. I can do this and there won't be any consequences, though I have 3 children, a husband, and dogs. It'll be so easy for me to do this. I'm going, no, I can't do it. But at the same time, I got to meet some really amazing people and sit behind the scenes while they were filming all 3 series that I've had on TV. And that was just such an eye-opening experience because that is such a gigantic collaborative effort requiring hundreds of people. And I sit alone in a room, and it just was overwhelming.
I bet. I mean, I can imagine like some of those people, like I've been on a few sets. I know Nick's been on a few. You've been on a few movies, haven't you? Were you not?
Peripherally, yeah, I've done a little bit of filming and bits and pieces. Yeah,
It's amazing. Like you get on there, and it is very overwhelming to see how everything it goes into play for that, and it's got to be a really cool thing to see your work kind of grow into this big gigantic thing, because I can't imagine.
It kind of is, and it gives you a huge feeling of responsibility. Like I am dragging all those people behind me through this. And if I'm not popular, they won't be popular. It's a scary feeling to have that much weighing on you.
Oh, interesting. That's an interesting perspective. So on your website, I read you have a great Q&A section. It's a super website. We'll put it in the show notes. And you talked about not getting precious with your stories and how they get cast, like your characters. And you can't hang on to that, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
You really can't. That way lies madness. If you want them to make anything, you have to concede quite a bit. I'm not the person testing out the actors for the role. They may know, and they did know, a lot of people I would never have thought of. So playing the fun casting in your head may be a pleasing game, but it has nothing to do with reality.
And the same on the writing side, right? And the edits and changes they make to your manuscript. They take your book, they turn it into a screenplay and chop lots of stuff, move stuff.
You know, amazingly, they have a stable of writers who think they're pretty good writers too.
Aren't they weird like that? Yeah.
They're just crazy like that. I don't know. It's like they knew what would go on the screen better than I did. Writing for visual is very different from writing for a reader.
Does your writing now change? As I started out writing, I didn't write with the mindset that this might turn into a movie. I mean, it's always a hope. Every one of us that writes hopes our books get turned into a movie. But now that yours have and been so hugely successful, do you ever, your next project, are you mindful of how it might look on screen as you write it?
Only to a very limited extent. I have to write a book the way I write a book. And my contract with the reader is just that I write the best book I can. That's what you have to do. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, I owe my reader this. I owe my reader that. I owe my reader the best book I can give them. Then it's their job to make of it what they will.
So, like, you have such a great sense of place. Like, even the Sookie Stack House, you set it in the South. It's this Louisiana. The Shakespeare books were set in Arkansas. And really great sense of place for these kind of out of the way places. And I know they're fictional towns, but how do you develop that sense of, reality that goes with it?
Well, that's the fun part, isn't it? To make the town real, to make the place where she lives, it's a part of her. Basically, I wanted to set it in Louisiana, but Anne Rice had the southern part staked out, so to speak. And I thought, no one wants the northern part of Louisiana, so I'll take that. And so that was the first challenge. And then the second one was populating the town where she lives, figuring out what she did for a living, and finding out why she would do something as stupid as dating a vampire. So I had to come up with a really good reason for that.
I know it's brilliant. That is so good. Like but it is great. And the characters, like you really do master some of those characters are just phenomenal and fun. And I love how you built those up. I mean, are you mindful? Obviously you're mindful you didn't want to kill the right ones, but that's great to populate them like that. So
everybody works in my books. I don't have extra people. They all have a function.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. No superfluous people, especially in a series, right? You can accumulate people if you're not careful in a series.
You have to have a person who has dimensions that you don't get till further on in the series. Like the woman who delivers the mail. She also breeds dogs. people have more than one thing they do. And she's pretty much a throwaway as a postal carrier. But when she can do all these other things, you can keep her around and you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Gotcha. So now you've written about just about everything, right? We've got the whole vampire thing, psychics, you've done murder mysteries. Is there an area that you're dying to write in that you haven't yet?
I'd love to write a horror novel. One of my favorite writers in the world is Shirley Jackson.
Oh,
and if
yeah.
I could just scare the shit out of people like she does, my job would be done.
I'm easy pickings when it comes to
me too. Most horror novels I can hardly read, but she is such an enormous talent at dribbling out the fear. At first you think, oh, I'm a little uneasy, and then it just escalates. And you think, oh, this is absolutely terrifying and creepy and weird. Oh, I wish I could do that.
Oh, my gosh. This is another question I had for you, because you write about vampires and there's blood and there's all kinds of things going on. Have you ever written a scene and gone, oh, I just creeped myself way the heck out with that. I can't put that in there. That's too much.
No. I mean,
never got there.
If you think of something like that, you have to go on and write it. Don't stop yourself.
Yeah. Keep it up in there. You gotta be edgy, right? Make sure you're on top on that pushing that boundary. So
yeah, you can't just be blah and pull back because you think, oh, the reader might get upset. Well, heck yeah, you hope so. That's what you're going for.
Yeah, scare them, make them think about it.
So, how many books are you writing now a year?
Just one a year plus a short story or two. And last year I didn't have a book because I had real life.
You had real life. Things get in the way, right?
Yeah, I had both my knees replaced. I had COVID. I had this. I had that. It was just one of those years where you think, well, this just isn't going to get done, is it? But finally, I finished the book. I turned it in. It's the sixth Gunny Rose, and it's turned in, and it'll be out next year. It'll be the last Gunny Rose, and it really ends with a bang. I just had a great time writing it once I felt well enough to write. And now I'm starting a different book, and I'm in line to write a story for an anthology about Valkyries. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm doing a little research on it right now.
That would be kind of neat. Are they gonna you have like a twist on them, like you do we're gonna throw them someplace cool like Louisiana or Texas?
I haven't picked the setting yet because I have to get the character and see where she's gonna fit in. Once I get her in my head, then I'll build everything around that.
So another question we ask this of all of our authors, and it's kind of one of our kind of final questions I want to ask you before we have a couple more, but this is a big one. It's what do you consider to be your author superpower? Like, what is it that you do really, really well, better than you think anyone else is doing, or that you can share with everyone else?
I really like my secondary characters. I try to make them all come to life as much as my primary character. I like them to be as close to being real people as a written character can be. I love that part of it. I like all those people to come to life. And then I feel like I've really done a good job.
I love that. That's a really good point that I hadn't thought of probably enough, because it's great pleasure when you get a note from somebody. You get notes about the main protagonist of the stories and everything else. When someone sends you a note about one of the other characters, that always tickles me.
It's gold. It's gold, isn't it? Or if someone tells you that you helped them. I get emails like that all the time. You helped me through a tough time. You helped me through my husband's deployment. You helped me through my deployment. You helped me when my mom was dying of cancer. And then you think, I actually am in the right business.
Yeah, it's those things right there that really hit. Yeah, they hit you when somebody sends you that, and you're like, oh yeah. I had a reader who reached out and said the same thing. Her husband died, and she just had read through all my books to keep, To me, that's like, oh wow, it just blows me away that people do that, and it's phenomenal. So,
yeah, very touching. Okay, so we got one more question for you. It's a lottery. Doug has a wheel we're going to spin with a bunch of questions on it.
Yeah, we do this wheel of fun, so you can see our wheel. It's got all these questions on it, and they're just fun questions, but it comes with sound effects. So I was like, what is the show that you are currently binging? Do you have any shows that you binge watch and are really getting into?
Oh yeah, I'm kind of weird like that. I like old episodes of Project Runway. I could never make a dress in my entire life, and the concept of people who can make a dress in 24 hours and have it look good. I mean, I just think that's amazing. I watched the Great British Baking Show, and I binge watched that.
My wife loves that show.
Oh, I love it. They're so civil to each other.
That's British. We're very nice where we stab each other.
Yeah, Lost is still great.
Oh, Lost was.
Someday I'm going to watch the Game of Thrones all the way through too.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if all the way through is the best way to go, but watch the first several seasons and skip the end. Did you read the books, The Game of Thrones?
I did. And I enjoyed them so much. And then I enjoyed the TV adaptation, which to me was one of the most successful
Very
ever done. And
it was very well done.
The cast, the expense of the settings.
It was so great. Yeah. And it's such good. Nick and I were just talking fantasy right before you came on. But yeah, it's really, that was one of those books that just blew me away when I was reading, and George R. R. Martin sometimes I read an author and I'm like, oh, I'm just not quite going to ever be where he is. And he's one of those that I was like, oh, wow, he's just phenomenal in his storytelling. He could write more, but
yeah, you can be short of R.R. Martin and still be really good. So that's...
Yeah. Yes, that's so true.
What are you watching lately, Doug?
I am right now currently watching the new season of Lincoln Lawyer.
Yeah, we binged through that.
And then I'm also finishing up the last season of Ozark.
I have not watched Ozark. I need to do that.
Oh, it's addictive. It's really good.
It's well done. I enjoyed it a lot. So it's been really good. How about you, Nick? What are you watching right now?
Well, believe it or not, I apologize, but I am not a vampire guy. I'm not a sort of witch story guy. And we are watching Discovery of Witches, which is, and I think it's on Hulu. And we just started watching it, and I'm a little bit hooked. I got to tell you, I think we're about 5 into it. And my wife loves that stuff. She loves fantasy. She's read your True Blood books and all that. And but I'm not. I don't normally watch that kind of stuff, but I'm actually getting hooked on this.
It's got some excellent scripts.
Charlaine, this has been brilliant. This has been such a pleasure for us to meet you and chat with you. Thank you for giving us the time.
Okay, thank you, both of you. I've enjoyed it so much.
That's author royalty right there. At some point there's from now until Christmas Eve when this show comes out, which is when you folks are going to be hearing it. If you never get to hear this, it's because during that period of time, she asked some other people, like, who are these numbnuts? I just did the show. And like, no, pull that show. I'm not going on with that.
I did think, just the idea that she had about not being so attached to everything, what you vision in your head. Like if you were to make a TV show, and I've said this all along, somebody came along and wanted to make a show out about Chase, and they can do whatever they want to with him. And she's obviously said the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, and I think most people realize that by now. But it would be tough to get in that headspace. I mean, I've got 16 books with AJ Bailey. She's like a friend of mine. I've spent a lot of time with AJ Bailey. So if they cast someone that I felt just really didn't fit, that would be tough. And there's absolutely bugger all you can do about it. So you got to get in that headspace beforehand, right?
Cash the check. That's all you got to do. To cash that check. No, but I think also like what she said about to build good side characters. That was the other thing that really came away with, the idea that those, we AJ and Chase, they make up so much of our, what the books are about. But, for you have Reggie and you have, all these other characters on the side that are just built into that world. And it's important, I think, to make those people likable too. So
I think it's really important to have a good sidekick going in there that has something of their own, some strength they bring to the table, not Batman and Robin like, but they've got to have a bold personality themselves. And I learned a lesson through the AJ series where I fell into that problem of having too many people around at one point, I felt like. And I was trying to include too many of those characters. And more recently, I focused it on AJ and Reg. So they're the two most powerful characters. And then there's a few others around them. Obviously, if anyone's read my books, then Thomas, who works with AJ, and then Reg's wife, Pearl. They're the sort of next level of major characters that need to be involved. And then because I write dual timelines, we've got a whole other storyline with these other characters in. So there's a lot of characters show up in my books, so I think you've really got to be careful with that. One lesson was when we did with the Tropical Authors series, and we wrote Graceless with 4 of us. And in the first book, Graceless, we took a new protagonist and put him through the worlds of our protagonists. And he went from one to the other. When we did Timeless, we thought, hey, there's a connection where they could all be in the Cayman Islands. And so we had them all there. What we didn't realize when we started out was the problem is they're all going to be there. So we had all these characters. We kind of fed through their worlds, but then you had the previous author's characters still hanging out and you had to do something with them. So actually, we sorted it out where they would go off down like go over to Little Cayman and they'd be with Nick Sullivan's characters. But it was tricky. So I think that's good lessons on both sides, right? You got to have strong support characters, but careful, especially in a series, how many you accumulate.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I kill off a few of mine as I go. So
kill them off. Yeah. Yeah. You got to kill them off a few people. That's tricky. I know kill your darlings and all that, the Stephen King thing, but killing the right darling. I mean, it was interesting that her editor pushed back and said, no, you can't kill this character. Yes, it's a great scene, but I meant to ask her if she killed him off at the end. Like if she got a kind of a revenge on him and like took him out at the end of the series.
That's a good question. Maybe we'll have to ask her next time. So if we get her back on, we talk her back into it. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no chance we'll get a second bite of that apple.
But for now, check out our show notes for links and our guest information, and we're gonna have all of that in there with her. And check out her website because it was lots of book recommendations that if you want to know what Charlaine's reading, check it out.
There's a great Q&A section too. That's good.
Oh, is there? And then also check out our social media. Look for new episodes here every 2 weeks.
Until next time, folks, be cool to each other.
Fair winds and following seas.
You've been listening to the Two Authors podcast with Nicholas Harvey and Douglas Pratt. Subscribe on your favorite platform for alerts on new shows coming every 2 weeks.